need them. Who wants to show me where the penguin is?
A lot of people ask why. Why treat the customer this way? Why? Because fuck them, that's why.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Now this video has been in the works for a little while, and as Arkham fans, you guys can read the title, you guys know what this is about. This is another Arkham Ideas video. It's a new year, and after my Arkham Asylum video, which you guys loved it somewhat, there was a lot of you that disagreed, but you guys still showed your love and support on it, so a big thank you. I was worried that video wasn't really going to be received very well, or anyone was going to see it, but you guys certainly proved me wrong, and some of you even gave me some ideas and wrote them in the comment section that I didn't even think of when making the video, so big thank you to you guys. One sentiment was shared in the comment section and throughout the entirety of the internet, which partially inspired this video, and that is remake
Arkham Origins. They should remake Arkham Origins.
So after a bunch of comments and actually replaying the game on my PS3, and after a bunch of long nights and hard work, I decided to make this video talking about how I think they could remake Batman Arkham Origins. Now, quick disclaimer, I know that this type of video has been done multiple times, and I don't want to regurgitate anything that has already been said, obviously. Second disclaimer is I don't want to discredit or invalidate any of the hardworking people that worked on Batman Arkham Origins originally, and I don't want to present my ideas as strictly better. That is not my intention. This ideas video is just purely for my ideas for a remake and how it could be handled if WB or WB Montreal were given the time and the proper resources to remake the game. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's actually get into the video. Now, Arkham Origins does have a bit of a rocky history, and honestly is a big reason why WB has mishandled and not wanted to touch this game for a very long time, especially with how it started out and how it was treated by fans. Eventually fans did grow to love it, but the damage has already been done, and it has always been treated like the red-headed stepchild of the Arkham trilogy ever since then, especially given the fact that they had to create a prequel game in a very small development cycle while Rocksteady made Arkham Knight. WB Montreal mainly focused on the idea of the story first and the gameplay last, and that kind of shows in the game, which actually gives Batman an arc and also focused on telling a very compelling Arkham story, and that's really what shows in the narrative. But in the gameplay, it does show that they focused more on the story compared to that where they used leftover assets that Rocksteady provided and other various stuff, which partially explains why this game does feel gameplay-wise like a lesser version of Arkham City, which was noticed by fans and myself almost immediately when the game did come out, partially fueled a lot of problems that the fans had with the game. So for an Arkham Origins remake to fix all that and also do its own thing as well would be uniquely difficult, but I feel that it can be done. So let's actually kick things off with gameplay alterations, and also we'll get into story and side mission alterations a little bit later. Now, getting into gameplay changes and alterations, I actually had to really think about this very carefully because some people don't mind that it plays like Arkham City and some people do, so I had to really walk a fine line of what to change and what to alter. And the very first change that I actually wanted to implement is the fact that I'm going to be cutting multiple gadgets from the game. Now, I know that's going to sound a little bit weird, but obviously some gadgets like the glue grenade and concussion grenade will be tweaked. But when it comes to the gadgets that are on the chopping block, they are the multiple batarang, the remote control batarang, explosive gel, and cryptographic sequencer. Actually, the last two gadgets will be replaced with other gadgets that would fit around this time period, so there will be a bit of a retcon that I will explain in the story section. Also, when it comes to other gameplay changes, we will have some changes to crimes and also the open world. Also, the Dark Knight challenges will still be a part of the game, but they will be slightly tweaked to make them a little bit easier and that can be performed in any part of the game. Now, when it comes to your fundamental gameplay like combat and traversal, this time around, the combat is going to still be brutal, but we're going to take a few pages back when it comes to the overall Arkham City aesthetic and stuff like that. I do want to make it a hybrid of Arkham Asylum stuff, using the original combat as its basis, where it does feel like its own thing in its entirety. Also, when it comes to your traversal, I actually wanted to make it to where you do rely more on your gliding and also the winds of the snow storm in Arkham Origins, kind of pulling a little bit from Marvel's Spider-Man 2 with the wind tunnels. Yes, the Batwing fast travel points are still going to be there, but it actually encourages you to glide through the storm and other various stuff. I know Gaming Dean has talked about his own fixes for the traversal system in Arkham Origins, but I didn't really like his ideas, so I kind of wanted to do my own thing. But if you don't really like them, let me know some of your ideas and your fixes in the comments down below. Now moving on to story and side mission alterations. Now, when it comes to the main story of the game, I do want to keep it mostly the same and intact with the original, because I know that a lot of people aren't going to like that, because most people didn't really like that the main villain of the game is just the Joker again, and I completely understand that, but WB Montreal did do something interesting with the Joker for the story, and I don't want to change that vision. But that's not to say that there isn't going to be any changes. The opening level is going to be slightly tweaked to go with my gameplay and gadget changes, especially when it comes to the opening level being the Blackgate level. When you drop into this level this time around, you only have access to the gadgets that you are using during the level, being the Batclaw, Batarangs, and your explosive gel launcher. Some elements of the level would practically stay the same, even the boss fight slightly, but I'll get into the boss fight a little bit later. Once you return to the Batcave and actually recover the facts about the assassins and all that, that's where some changes are implemented as well. Alfred this time around doesn't just give you the hint to train, he also tells you before leaving to grab your smoke bombs from your workbench, which introduces you to a new gadget, and also you do grab some extra parts, which sets up something that happens at the GCR sequence. At the GCR radio tower, you're still introduced to your stealth mechanics, but when you do have to recreate the crime scene to figure out why the panel exploded and all that, it would practically stay the same except for the part that you don't just have to recreate the crime scene to find the victim's access card, you actually have to build, very similar to the REC gun, the decoder to bypass the access panel. This way it actually better connects to Arkham Shadows, and also it does fit more in the narrative of him not having certain gadgets before you get to Arkham Asylum. Obviously there would be other tweaks to certain sequences here and there to better suit the changes to the gadgets, and also certain gadgets will still be there, but they would be slightly tweaked in other various stuff. Now when it comes to side missions, most wanted side missions will actually be a separate tab very similar to the Season of Infamy, while the regular side missions, actually being a couple new ones, will be scattered throughout the levels, not just helping you find collectibles, but actually giving you side missions as well, very similar to Arkham City. But with gameplay, side missions, and story aside, let's actually get into bosses. Kicking things off with the very first assassin that you have to deal with, the King of the Sewers, Killer Croc. Now moving on to Killer Croc, I actually don't mind this boss. It is a tutorial boss, so it is supposed to be easy, very simplistic. Yes, he can throw canisters, and also he does have a lunge attack and a couple other things that are a part of this boss, but I do feel like there could have been more, aside of giving him enemies that spawn in because of the helicopter and that kind of leaves you room to be vulnerable. There isn't too much. So I actually want to utilize the environment where he can actually rip off different things and use them against you and throw them at you, but also you have the different vents on the ground as well. Very similar to the lizard fight and also the GCPD sequence, you can push Killer Croc into one of those vents and something could happen. Also, he would still have his lunge attacks and maybe a couple other ones, and also you would have the basic enemies you would have to fight as well, but I did want to utilize the environment a little bit more, where he can rip off the spikes and try to stab you with them, and also some other stuff as well, because he is kind of basic. It more layers to the fight. Killer Croc out of the way, let's move on from the crocodile to the world's deadliest assassin. Now it's time to get into the world's greatest assassin, Deathstroke. Now, I personally love this fight, and I actually struggled a bit when it came to remaking it, because I know a lot of people are questioning, why remake this fight? It's perfect. It's a one-on-one brawl with two equals, and it actually tests your knowledge of the combat system. And that's something I didn't want to change, and honestly, that's what I love about this boss fight. When it comes to the Deathstroke boss fight, I actually had to get in a bit of a different mindset, because I didn't want to remake the fight, but I did want to add on to it. Now, doing research for this boss section, especially for the Deathstroke boss fight, I actually wanted to see if there was any cut content for the Deathstroke boss fight, and really, there wasn't much. Nothing that I could really pull from besides unutilized animations and dialogue that I could use for brand new attacks and animations. So I actually had to get relatively creative, because I obviously didn't want to change the fight, but I did want to add more layers to it, because once you defeat Deathstroke, once you have an idea of how he fights and operates, he's a bit of a pushover, so you already have an idea of his patterns and his attacks, and once you know those, he's a relatively easy fight, and that's something I want to change. So what are the new attacks that I want to add? Now, obviously, I actually had to get relatively creative. Now, when it comes to new patterns and attacks for Deathstroke in this boss fight, I actually had to get creative and think what would work. So I actually thought, well, he does use the remote claw, and he uses a sniper. He doesn't use too much long-range stuff. Even though Batman has a lot of gadgets, Deathstroke should have just as much to mess around with as Batman. So I wanted to layer this boss fight with some extra stages. Besides being able to use the remote claw, he actually has the ability to throw out different ninja stars. Sometimes he can do it in the air, or he can do it in the ground, where you have to either block them or counter them, more specifically, and throw them back, or dodge out of the way and risk taking damage, taking a bit of inspiration from the Mr. Pig fight from Arkham Knight, and also the fight with Deathstroke and Damian from Batman and Robin, even being able to catch them and throw them back at Deathstroke, forcing Deathstroke to either slice them with his sword, whack them out of the way with his bow staff, or catch them outright, where sometimes he can even take damage. Another pattern that I wanted to implement is changes to his bow staff. Now, in his first stage, it would operate very standard, but I feel like once you knock off the helmet, Deathstroke should really push his bow staff to the extreme. I also thought of an idea very similar to Arkham Knight with the electrical-based militia enemies, where basically Deathstroke would electrify the tips of his staff and use it in various ways, and you can't outright attack him or he will shock you, or even send out shockwaves stabbing the ground and stuff like that. Also, another ability that I thought would be relatively cool, pulling a little bit from Daredevil and one of the villains from Jedi Survivor, he would actually have a wire that he can use to do more long-range attacks with his staff. Basically, separating the staff with a wire to whack at you and do other various stuff. Now, as for the sword, I actually wanted to keep that relatively the same just because it's the final stage of the fight. Basically, this is an overall physical brawl and he's using all his weapons and all his skills at his disposal. So, obviously, for the sword, I wanted to keep it mostly the same, but add maybe a couple extra attacks, being able to slash at the ground, creating fiery sparks that he can send out, very similar to how Grundy can punch the ground and send out the different electricity waves in Arkham City. I wanted to have a very similar attack, but kind of fire-based, mixed with sparks and waves, with the sword, so I figured that would be a pretty interesting ability. Also, maybe he has the ability to jump up in the air and throw the sword down, forcing you to have to dodge it, and he picks it back up and then tries to charge at you, and other various attacks. Obviously, he would still have the remote claw ability, and he still would have the smoke bomb and then have to beat down on him, but I kind of want to decrease the beatdown damage. This way, you can actually see him utilize these other based attacks. So, most bosses in the game will have their health decrease slower. Deathstroke is no exception. But with Deathstroke out of the way, now let's move on from the world's greatest assassin to the world's deadliest marksman.
Lloyd Lawton, aka Deadshot.
Now, getting into Deadshot, I am fully aware that this fight isn't a part of the main story, it is a part of a side mission, but I honestly want to tweak the side mission and slightly retcon a couple things, but not like Suicide Squad. No, I'm going to keep the Deadshot the same, I just want to retcon some elements of the story of the side mission and actually extend it a little bit more. Because this particular side mission goes really fast, as fast as Deathstroke being taken out in Arkham Knight. A lot of the boss fights are great, including this one, which I don't have too many problems with. It does take a lot of notes from Harley Quinn's Revenge and also the Two-Face fight, but I do feel that Deadshot feeling a little too arrogant and also the pacing of the side mission feeling a little bit rushed, and it does feel like there could have been more there, especially with the character of Deadshot being the world's greatest marksman. So yeah. So let's actually get into my improvements for the Deadshot side mission. Now, the opening of the side mission will overall stay the same, with the flare and the helicopter crash, and having to recreate the crime scene to figure out what exactly happened, finding out that Deadshot took down the helicopter, and finding his shooting position. That overall element is going to stay the exact same, but where things pivot is when you get the transmission. This time around, when you actually get the transmission, it's not as staticky, and also Deadshot would let you know that he has 3 different hostages. He also would tell you that you're not his only target this evening. This was just meant to get your attention. Keep an eye out, because I never miss. And then, obviously, the side mission would end and you would contact Alfred. Batman would tell Alfred about these different events, and also would tell Alfred to try to find a way of tracking Deadshot. And obviously, Alfred would get to work on that. And this would be the start of Deadshot's most wanted side mission. Now, obviously, later on, there would be a random gunshot would be heard, fairly similar to Batman Arkham City. You would track down the location and finding someone dead, having to recreate the crime scene to find Deadshot's firing position, leading you to where he fired from. Obviously, just like before, you scan for evidence, finding another shell casing with another radio frequency code. But this time around, Deadshot would actually give you the locations of 2 of the hostages. After this, Batman would contact Alfred, obviously letting him know that Deadshot has 3 different hostages. Batman would let Alfred know that he has locations of 2 of the hostages, but not the 3rd. He probably will need help tracking that 3rd one down, but we'll see. Obviously, Deadshot will slip up. He's arrogant. And obviously, Batman would cut the call with Alfred and make his way to the 1st location. Obviously, there'd be thugs guarding the hostage, just like typical Arkham stealth fashion, stealth to take out the thugs and rescue the hostage. But when Batman tries to interrogate one of the thugs for the 3rd location, he gets shot and killed by Deadshot. Obviously, you have to recreate the crime scene and then make your way there, finding a tripod that Deadshot used to steady his shot, and obviously a radio nearby that Deadshot would be broadcasting out of, telling Batman to never try that again. Once Deadshot would say all he needs to, the radio would actually blow up, so you can't trace the signal. But you can try to scan certain things, and then eventually you would make your way to the 2nd location. Even harder than the 1st, but similar premise. Take out the thugs and rescue the hostage. This time around, when you tried to interrogate one of the thugs, you would save him just in the nick of time and then make your way to Deadshot's firing position. There would be a bit of a mini fight chase with Deadshot, but he would get away, leaving another code that would lead you to the final location, being the bank. Just like in the OG game, but this time around, it would be a lot harder, having tech from the previous 2 locations and also a lot of thugs that you have to deal with, and also Deadshot as well. He doesn't just have the ability to ricochet his bullets off the walls, you also have to deal with the booby traps from the previous locations that are primed around the bank. And also to enhance some of the stealth elements, he does learn from what you're doing, kind of like the Mr. Freeze fight, and also he does have the ability to change his ammo types, kind of pulling from the Injustice 2 Deadshot's moveset, where basically he has the ability to change up his ammo types that affect Batman if he gets hit with them, and other various stuff. And also Deadshot can activate certain traps if you're nearby, and a couple other things as well. Now, obviously, I thought the natural idea of Deadshot being able to change up his ammo types that can do different stuff really works well, and I really couldn't come up with too many existing ideas for this boss fight because it's already great. I just wanted to enhance the already existing elements like the stealth stuff and blah blah blah. Now moving on to the pyromaniac himself, Firefly.
A Firefly.
Gotham's gonna burn!
Now moving on to Firefly, one of my favorite villains and also one of my favorite sections of Batman Arkham Origins. I personally struggled a lot with coming up with brand new ideas for this section because I know that a lot of Arkham fans are going to be like, if it's not broke, why fix it? Which I agree with to some extent. This is one of the most cinematic parts of the game, but also it's one of the most tense moments. The problem is sometimes those tense moments aren't really felt because there is no consequences that are felt through gameplay and also different different story choices. So let's actually tweak a little bit of the lead up first, and then we'll fix the boss fight. Now when it comes to tweaking the overall lead up, I actually want to improve the combat sections and also the stealth sections, because they're not really that difficult, and also I don't want to get rid of the bombs, but I do want to make them actually play a role in these sections, where the thugs will actually try to activate them if they know you're in the room, or they will try to notify Firefly, forcing you to actually play well and actually not be seen throughout this entirety of the section. And if you're in combat encounters, very similar to Azrael and also Marvel's Spider-Man, actually have to take them out very quickly or one of them will notify Firefly. Partially taking a lot of inspiration from the Botanical Garden segment in Batman Arkham Asylum and the later GCPD sequence in Batman Arkham Knight. So there's actually a lot more consequences compared to the original, which is something that I always had a problem with when it came to the entirety of the sequence. Firefly doesn't even know Batman's there until the end. Even though this section goes hand in hand with the story in both Batman and Jim Gordon's arcs, I do feel like this little add-on actually would make the most sense when it comes to the gameplay and also the tension of the overall section, the narrative at this point in the game. Now that we've tweaked the overall lead up, let's actually improve the boss at the very end, Firefly himself. Now this fight is an overall great encounter, but it is kind of mid in a lot of ways. It just boils down to you chucking stuff at him. Legitimately, that's all you're really doing, throwing batarangs and glue grenades at him, and occasionally you'll use the bat claw to pull him down to your level for a massive attack. And the fact that he doesn't really have too many attacks doesn't really help the fight either. Really only has maybe 4 basic attacks and the ability to throw out grenades, and that's it. Now, I will say that this fight is a lot better than Arkham Knight's, but I do feel like in certain areas it is slightly still disappointing. I feel like Firefly should use a lot more of the environment to his advantage, and also there should be a lot more verticality to this fight. Even being able to fight him in the air would have been a very interesting addition and played on the fact that he can fly. Partially, you could take a bit of inspiration from Marvel's Avengers and also the Vulture fight in Marvel's Spider-Man. Hell, the fact that he doesn't even use his jetpack in this fight is kind of disappointing, and I want to change that with some brand new attacks, where he can actually use his jetpack as an instrument to fight you. Basically, very similar to the Boulder Slam, also taking a bit of inspiration from Suicide Squad to Kill the Justice League. Yes, I know, hold your booze. Wanted to give him an ability that Deadshot had in the reveal trailer to leak his jetpack fuel and light it, creating a bit of a blast radius that you have to dodge and stuff like that. And he could slam back into the ground, creating a bit of fire bursts. Also, he does have the ability to launch and grab you, throw you, or even have a bit of verticality to where he can keep certain areas of that bridge on fire, or even use the wreckage to his advantage and actually use the environment and heat certain things up and blast them, making you have to dodge certain things and actually worry about your environment. Obviously, he'll have his grenade attacks as well, where you can have him have the ability to shoot out fire that has chemicals that can poison you or give you severe damage that have different colors. Because of the fact this is Firefly, I do want to capitalize on the fact that he can use the environment against you and the destruction of the bridge to create different explosions and also limit your movement. Very similar to the Poison Ivy fight in my Arkham Asylum remake video, where it actually forces you to move around a lot more. You aren't boiled down to 3 different gadgets, being able to use the gel launcher and the remote claw to help you avoid and actually counter certain Firefly attacks. But with Firefly out of the way, let's actually get into the poisonous viper herself, Copperhead.
Copperhead. Strange. These reports reference a male, not a female.
I bet you never expected the end to come like this.
Now moving on to Copperhead, I actually struggled a little bit with coming up with brand new reimaginings and also ideas for this fight. And after banging my head against the wall and getting some ideas from a friend, I think I found the perfect middle ground to make the fight great and also take the elements that are from the story and also the existing gameplay without changing it too much, but making the fight feel a little bit different while it also still is the same, especially when it comes to the core aspects of the Copperhead fight. It does reuse assets from the Ra's al Ghul fight from Batman Arkham City, with some sprinkled in Scarecrow influence as well, and some of the strategies from fights actually worm their way into this fight as a whole. Batman being sick, not being able to trust what he can see and hear, and also you're having to take on multiple enemies at once. And honestly, I feel like there's a lot more to expand on, especially because of the fact that you are poisoned with a neurotoxin, and that's where I feel like this fight could have been extended just a little bit. Just like with the Firefly section, I'm going to fix the overall lead up and then the overall boss itself. Now for the very first change, I actually want to take the overall walking sequence and make it a part of the boss fight. Sounds weird, let me explain. Now, obviously, the walking sequence is very cliche. Batman's poisoned, so he's slowly going to make his way to the ground floor, but if you stand in one place, nothing really happens, so it makes this sequence kind of pointless. So I actually want to wrap the poison mechanics into the overall boss fight in two different stages. The first sequence is actually more stealth oriented, and the second is the overall boss fight itself. For the first stage, the walking sequence actually becomes a little bit more of a stealth encounter as you're making your way up to the ground floor. In the original game, you didn't really know where Copperhead was, and sometimes she'll pop up and there'll be different illusions. Basically, I wanted to expand on that, but make this sequence just a little bit longer, taking a bit of inspiration from the different stealth boss fights in the Arkham series, and also mixing that with a little bit of Killer Croc influence from the original Arkham Asylum fight. Also taking a bit of a heavy influence from the Nosferatu fight from Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 4 Remake. This time around, you actually have to worry about Copperhead sneaking up on you. You don't know where she's at. She can actually stealth takedowns on you, and you have to counter them or block them. Basically, if you do get hit, which this fight encourages you not to, basically it will speed up the poison and make your health slowly drain. Taking a bit of inspiration from the Scorpion fight from Marvel's Spider-Man, illusion element is still there. Besides just having them taunt you, you do have to fight them, but if you are more affected by Copperhead's poison, it's harder to fight them because they become more real. So this way, you're not really fighting just Copperhead clones and illusions, you're also fighting the people you couldn't save that are illusions. And once you make your way to the upper levels for the second phase of the actual fight, basically that's where there's a lot more changes. Besides just spawning different illusions and you have to fight her and she is treated a little bit like a normal enemy, I did want to give her a couple more patterns and also expand on this fight. If you do get hit, the arena actually gets a little bit more smaller and it becomes a lot more claustrophobic. Also, I did want to give her some more acrobatic and also some more contortionist attacks to attack you. And I also wanted to make her attacks a combination of the knife enemy, the ninja enemy, and also the martial artist with the way you have to fight her. Some of her core patterns would still be there, but there would be a couple new ones. But I couldn't really come up with too many new ideas. With Copperhead out of the way, let's move on to the one-woman army herself, Shiva.
Shiva. Her skill is unmatched.
Now, when it comes to the Shiva side mission and boss fight, I did want to keep it relatively the same. Fake baby, all that stuff is still going to be there, but this time around, I do want to add a secondary hostage that you have to save, who was killed by Shiva in front of Batman, that actually leads into a boss fight. Some elements of the side mission, like her brief conversations where you fight her quickly and stuff like that, would remain the same. But I actually wanted to have a lesser kind of like Deathstroke-esque boss fight with her. Takes a little bit of inspiration from the Ra's al Ghul fight. You're still kind of reusing assets and it kind of fits in with some of the ideas of Arkham Origins as a whole. You still have the fight that's kind of the same that you have at the end, but it's kind of changed up just a little bit. But overall, I really couldn't come up with too many for Lady Shiva boss and also new ideas to add on to the side mission. So let me know some of yours in the comments down below because I couldn't really come up with anything at all. I did try to ask a friend, even he struggled a little bit. So yeah, now moving on to the final boss, and that is Bane. Now getting into the Bane boss fights, I know that there are 3, and honestly the second one is the one that needs to change the most. Last one, yes, it does need to be tweaked a little bit, but the first one can stay relatively the same. Maybe you could add a couple new moves to the original first fight, but honestly the second fight really needs to be spruced up a lot. Bane should not be pulling his punches, he should have brand new moves, and also shouldn't be a copy of what we had originally. And yes, I know you're kind of doing a similar strategy of what we had in the original Arkham fights, but for Bane, he should have brand new moves because he's not that strong, but he is pretty strong. So giving him a thunderclap and also the ability to do a grand slam after running, and also maybe he does have the ability to do launch grabs, and also for the stealth fight, we could take a bit of inspiration from the unused version from the original Batman Arkham Asylum pre-alpha. This time around, the stealth fight could actually be 2 stages, where you have an arena of him hunting you down, very similar to the pre-alpha, and the other stage is in the locker room that's more closed off and stuff like that. Very similar to the original game. So this time around, it's the stealth fight that's 2 stages compared to the combat fight when you fight him originally. So you get a bit of both worlds, where there's 2 different more closed off versions of stealth and a more open one. But hey, that's just me. I really couldn't come up with too many ideas for the Bane fights for this game because they are pretty good, but they do need to be expanded on just a little bit. But that's just me. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Peace out, and bye-bye.